we've all been there. Think about the last time you wanted a situation, maybe a new relationship, maybe a promising date, to work out so perfectly that you willingly put on blinders. You wanted it so badly that you walked right past every single warning sign like it was invisible. Here is the crazy thing about human nature. The more desperately you want a specific outcome, the easier it becomes to completely misread reality. You sit there and convince yourself that you're observing the situation objectively. You think you're being logical, but in reality, you are completely blind to the actual dynamics playing out right in front of your face. You see, attraction doesn't just pull you into a dynamic. It actively edits your perception of reality. It takes the raw, objective data of human behavior and violently twists it to fit a script you've already written in your head. Now listen to me. You are not weak or broken for experiencing this. You are simply operating under a heavily rigged biological system. Society has conditioned you to trust your feelings completely, to follow your heart no matter what. But right now, those feelings are acting as a highly manipulative filter. They are specifically designed to keep you emotionally invested in a fantasy. Today, we're going to expose this cognitive trap. We are going to dismantle the exact psychological error that makes otherwise incredibly smart men ignore painfully obvious facts. You're going to learn how desire creates a dangerous, selective vision, and exactly why we so often fall for a fabricated story rather than the real, flawed person standing in front of us. Let's pop the hood on your neurobiology for a second to really understand this blind spot. Your brain is, essentially, a highly efficient prediction machine. But once it decides it really wants a certain conclusion, its entire mode of operation flips. It instantly stops functioning like an objective scientist searching for the truth. Instead, it puts on a cheap suit and starts acting like a highly biased defense attorney. In psychology, this mechanism is called confirmation bias. And let me tell you, when it comes to modern dating and relationships, it is a devastating structural flaw. Here's how it happens. When you feel a massive spike of attraction, your brain releases a flood of dopamine. Your mind immediately decides, okay, securing this person is our top priority. From that second on, it begins actively hunting for any tiny piece of evidence that supports your desire. It takes every positive signal and magnifies it on a giant IMAX screen. At the exact same time, it aggressively filters out anything that contradicts your hope. It deletes the red flags. It minimizes the casual disrespect. It completely ignores glaring behavioral inconsistency. Why? Because processing conflicting information requires immense cognitive energy, and your brain just wants to save energy and protect that sweet dopamine loop. Back in our ancestral days, forming quick bonds was incredibly useful for tribal survival. But in the incredibly complex, often chaotic landscape of modern dating, it's a fatal liability. This mental habit causes a complete collapse of your internal frame. You basically abandon your rational core just to chase a mirage. You replace actual reality with a highly edited, cinematic narrative. And my friend, this places you in a position of extreme psychological vulnerability. You lose all of your walking away power because you are no longer reacting to facts. You are reacting to a phantom that you created entirely in your own mind. A man with a truly grounded, rational frame understands this biological trap perfectly. He knows his perception is deeply compromised the exact moment strong desire enters the equation. He operates from a position of profound internal scarcity when it comes to handing out his trust. He flat out refuses to hand over his emotional stability to an unverified narrative. So, Let's drag this concept out of the textbook and into everyday reality. This psychological error destroys your leverage in three very specific ways. The first, real-world trap, is the dangerous distortion of the intermittent reward. Think about how this plays out in modern digital communication. We've all seen the slot machine effect. You're dealing with someone who consistently shows you zero effort. They take hours, sometimes days, to reply to a normal, everyday message. Their behavior establishes a cold, undeniable pattern of disinterest. But then, right when you're about to give up, boom, out of nowhere, they send one warm, engaging text. A guy who lacks frame control instantly latches onto this single data point like a drowning man grabbing a life raft. He uses one warm message to completely erase 5 weeks of cold patterns. He tells himself, this rare spark of interest is the real dynamic. The coldness was just a temporary anomaly because they were busy. Do you see what's happening? This is confirmation bias weaponized against your own self-respect. You are taking a totally meaningless breadcrumb and artificially inflating it into a 5-course meal. This traps you in a brutal cycle of intermittent reinforcement. You literally become addicted to the emotional roller coaster of waiting for that next crumb. This behavior broadcasts a massive lack of internal abundance. It proves to the other person that your presence holds zero actual weight. You stop being a challenge, and you become a highly predictable pawn, actively rewarding their inconsistency with your unwavering availability. Trap number 2. The fatal habit of inflating small chemistry into grand destiny. Imagine you meet someone and you share a few decent conversations. You both like the same obscure band, you have a few shared interests, and there's a nice, minor spark of connection. The highly reactive man immediately takes this small baseline data and projects it decades into the future. He starts building an entire mental empire based on a few hours of interaction over coffee. He decides that this rare feeling must mean something profound, unique, and destined by the stars. Look, this is just pure ego disguised as romantic optimism. You are assuming you've uncovered a hidden reality that nobody else sees. The truth? It is much colder, but honestly, much more liberating. Small chemistry is just a basic biological reaction. It is incredibly common, and it means absolutely nothing about your long-term compatibility. When you idealize someone that early, you project a fictional character onto them. You force them to wear a mask that you designed specifically to soothe your own anxieties. And what happens when their actual, normal human flaws finally bleed through? Your reality shatters. You feel betrayed. But here is the kicker. They never actually lied to you. You simply lied to yourself by ignoring who they actually were from day one. This overinvestment completely destroys the natural tension required for mutual respect. You forfeit your power the exact second you stop evaluating them objectively. Trap number 3 is what I call the toxic renaming of obvious incompatibility. Let's say you observe clear boundary violations or a massive lack of shared values. The evidence is literally staring you right in the face. A highly grounded man would process this data, immediately enforce his boundaries, and utilize his walking away power without a second of hesitation. But the man blinded by desire? He refuses to accept the loss. So, he invents a clever psychological workaround to protect his fantasy. He renames their fundamental character flaws as minor issues of timing. He tells himself, "Oh, she's not disrespectful, she's just really stressed at work right now." Or, "She's just currently unavailable." He rationalizes their bad behavior to avoid the sharp pain of walking away. Think about how crazy that is. He acts as the pro bono defense attorney for someone who is actively disrespecting his time. This behavior broadcasts a desperate, suffocating need to control the outcome. It signals loud and clear that your internal frame is completely hollow. When you make excuses for poor treatment, you set a devastating precedent. You teach them exactly how little respect you are willing to tolerate. You outsource your emotional baseline to someone who isn't even trying. That is textbook low-value behavior, and I guarantee it leads to a rapid loss of status. Now, I have to call out some absolute garbage advice floating around the modern self-improvement space. Society loves to tell you to always follow your heart and trust your intuition. They claim that blindly leaning into your intense feelings is the ultimate path to authenticity. Let me be crystal clear about this toxic deception. Blindly following a distorted biological impulse is a guaranteed one-way ticket to weakness. A man who lets unchecked desire dictate his actions is a slave to his neurochemistry. Look at two totally distinct behavioral profiles to see the stark difference. Observe the man who operates without a solid internal frame. He feels a spark of attraction and completely drops his guard. He ignores his daily mission, his gym routine, his work, just to obsess over their every move. When they pull away, he panics and sends long emotional paragraphs trying to logic them into staying. He is frantically seeking external validation to maintain his fabricated story. In a split second, he transitions from a respected equal to a burdensome, needy liability. Now, observe the man who has genuinely mastered his internal mechanics. He feels the exact same biological pull of desire. He recognizes the primitive spike of attraction in his own nervous system. He's human, after all. But he applies pure, unshakable detachment. He understands that his mind is currently trying to play a trick on him. He steps back, breathes, and evaluates their behavioral consistency over a long period. He maintains absolute frame control through the sheer, undeniable discipline of observation. So, how do we actually fix this? You can't simply meditate away millions of years of deep evolutionary programming. You must implement strict, unshakable practices to physically regain control of your perception. Think of these safe practices as structural guardrails for your mind. They completely eliminate the dark spaces where self-deception likes to grow. The first practice is the aggressive auditing of your evidence. When you feel a strong desire forming, your brain will automatically collect only the positive signals. You must forcefully demand the opposite data. Take a physical piece of paper and write down the confirming evidence on one side. Then, force yourself to write down all the disconfirming evidence on the other side. List the delayed replies, the canceled plans, the flaky behavior, and the subtle shifts in tone. Separate the cold, physical reality from the tragic, cinematic narrative playing in your head. Seeing the negative data physically written down in ink short-circuits that dopamine loop.
It forces your logical brain to process the reality you are desperately trying to ignore.
The second safe practice is the implementation of the third-party filter. You must temporarily remove your ego from the equation entirely. When you find yourself confused by an ambiguous pattern of behavior, step outside of yourself. Ask yourself one highly analytical question. What would I immediately conclude if my best friend showed me this exact same pattern? If your buddy brought you this identical evidence, you would likely laugh and tell him to walk away immediately. You would easily see the disrespect because your vision wouldn't be clouded by desire. Apply that exact same cold, protective rationality to your own life. Do not grant yourself a special magical exemption from logic. The third safe practice is the absolute delay of major conclusions. You have to stop building mental castles based on a few good days. Implement a strict internal rule regarding behavioral consistency. A single action is just a data point. A repeated action is a verified pattern. You are not allowed to draw any major conclusions until the pattern repeats itself consistently over time. If you cannot prove their interest with a long, undeniable history of hard evidence, you must discard the assumption entirely. Shift your heavy calculating focus immediately back to your own primary mission. Pour that massive mental energy into optimizing your own resources, your career, and your physical training. Make your attention incredibly scarce and genuinely difficult to access. A man who is busy building his own empire simply does not have the time to sit around obsessing over illusions. Look, you've probably spent years playing the exhausting role of the romantic optimist. You've drained your energy trying to decode mixed signals and playing mental gymnastics to rationalize bad behavior.
You truly believed that if you just cared enough, the reality would magically match your fantasy. But you now clearly understand the hidden mechanics of this silent failure. Desire is incredibly dangerous precisely because it edits the evidence of your own eyes. Your willingness to ignore reality is exactly the thing that destroys your perceived value in the world. Real maturity begins the exact moment you stop letting attraction hijack your logical framework. You are no longer a reactive pawn at the mercy of your own neurochemistry. You now possess the cold, rational framework required to step back, detach, and see things for what they are. Respect and clarity are never, ever successfully negotiated through desperate hopes or ignored red flags. They are slowly and silently accumulated through undeniable behavioral consistency and grounded observation. You have the ultimate, unbreakable power of outcome independence right at your disposal. So, the next time you find yourself making excuses for an inconsistent pattern, you face a critical choice. Will you surrender your internal frame to a comforting, fictional illusion? Or will you accept the cold, hard evidence and silently walk away?